We all have that one movie we absolutely adored as a kid that we eventually came to realize wasn't all that good, but still can't help but love anyway. For me, that movie has always been Digimon the movie. That and Shark Boy and Lava Girl, but that's a story for another day. Digimon is a multimedia franchise created by Bandai in 1997. Starting out as digital pet simulators in the same vein of Tamagotchi, Digimon would become a smash hit across the globe, spawning toys, manga, video games, and most prominently, anime. While I have pretty much no idea what's going on with the franchise now these days, as a kid, I absolutely loved the Digimon anime, specifically Adventure and Tamers, with all of the action and fun monster designs that I loved in Pokemon, along with way more drama, significantly higher stakes, and a surprising amount of death. It was everything that my violence-loving 8-year-old brain could ask for. I especially love how balls to the walls nuts the Digimon designs would get. Oh, this Pokemon is a rabbit that evolves into a bigger rabbit? How quaint. This Digimon is a rabbit that digivolves into a giant rabbit with machine guns for hands, that now wears pants for some reason, then into an even bigger robot rabbit with missile launcher arms, and then into a kaiju-sized robot with all of the weapons. This was just the best kind of anime nonsense. Fox, who owned the English distribution rights to Digimon at the time, saw how popular the show was in the West, and wanting to replicate the success of the Pokemon movies, decided that they wanted to release a Digimon theatrical film. Only problem was that there wasn't a feature-length Digimon movie that they could dub and release for the US. So Fox, in their infinite wisdom, decided to take the 3 completely unrelated Digimon OVAs that were already released in Japan, edit them down, stitch the remains together to create something feature film-length, and tried to cobble together an overarching plot to sell the illusion that it's actually a singular movie. And thus, Digimon the movie was born. While managing to make $16 million against a $5 million budget, Digimon the movie was nowhere near as successful as the Pokemon films, and got slammed by critics. As for Digimon fans, while they were initially hostile towards the film for its bizarre plot structure and how it differed from the OVAs, more people would come around to Digimon the movie, and see it as a bit of a guilty pleasure of sorts. But none of that mattered to me, because back in the day, I absolutely loved this movie. The action, the animation, the cool villain, the soundtrack, the killer transformations and designs. I didn't think that movies could possibly get any better. However, looking back on it as an adult, I've come to realize that Digimon the movie isn't quite the avant-garde, flawless masterpiece that my impressionable child brain made it out to be. And if I'm being honest, it's a complete mess of a film that's deeply flawed on a conceptual level. That said, I still think that Digimon the movie is a ton of fun, and I'd like to share with all of you my experience revisiting this absolutely dumb film from my childhood. And just for fun, I'll also be covering the original OVAs that make up Digimon the movie, and see how they compare to it. This was my first time watching these OVAs, and my god did they completely change the way I look at this movie. So without further ado, let's take a look at the greatness that is Digimon the movie. Right after we talk about Angela Anaconda. You remember Angela Anaconda, don't you? Because I sure don't. Okay, so for some reason, Fox decided to place a 4-minute Angela Anaconda short in front of Digimon the movie. Because who needs the Pokemon movie's adorable shorts about Pikachu and friends going on adventures, when Digimon the movie has The Uncanny Valley, the show? Like, was this show popular when I was on? Was there this huge overlap between Digimon and Angela Anaconda fans? I mean, why this? Okay, I may have lied a bit earlier. I do vaguely remember watching a few episodes of this show as a kid. And based on this short, and what little I can recall of the series itself, Angela Anaconda was this typical slice-of-life cartoon about this ginger kid and her 3 stock best friends. The joke with the girl is that she's fat. The joke with the one boy is that he's a nerd. And the joke with the other boy is that he exists, I guess? The only other thing to note is that in each episode, Angela fantasizes about murdering those who cross her, most prominently this rich girl bully stereotype, and its art style is... well, it gets points for standing out. The reason why I'm talking about this short is that I personally think that it's an integral part of the Digimon the movie experience. It's simply too iconic, too intertwined with the film for me to just skip over. That, and I had to subject myself to this whenever I wanted to watch the cool movie about anime monsters killing each other. So now you all have to suffer like I did. Now as for the short itself, basically nothing happens in it. Angela and her friends are waiting in line for Digimon the movie. They go to see Digimon the movie. Angela fantasizes about murdering the girl bully for being a freaking narc, as well as her teacher. because her hair's blocking her view? I don't know, I don't think that woman did enough to warrant this animosity, but what do I know? Only in this short, she's fantasizing about killing her enemies as a Digimon. Except no, she isn't. It's very clear that the writers of Angela Anaconda weren't too familiar with Digimon. The entire bit reads like a middle-aged man desperately trying to relate to his new stepson and failing miserably at it. I mean, humans turning into Digimon? Digimon would never do that. I mean, that's... Did Frontier steal from Angela Anaconda? But then, as it turns out, the kids accidentally went to a theater playing a black and white French movie, and then they all run out. End of short. Nothing was accomplished, no lessons were learned, it didn't even have much in the way of actual jokes. This was 4 minutes of absolutely nothing. Is this what the entire show was like? Seriously, why does this short exist? Also, it apparently caused the kid's parents to get divorced. Are you happy, Angela? You destroyed a family! Oh, who am I kidding? Of course she is. Look into those cold, dead eyes and tell me that girl has a soul. And with that horrible nonsense out of the way, let's dive into the fun nonsense that is Digimon the movie. For real this time. The movie wastes no time in letting you know what kind of wild ride you're in for. And it opens on the Digi-Rap, as in a rap remix of the Digimon theme song. It's going to be that kind of movie. Now, due to copyrights, I can't play it for you, but I want my viewers to know about the wonder that is the Digi-Rap, so I'm just going to read you some of the lyrics. Ahem. The Digi-Dudes will Digi-Rule with Digi-Ability and Digitude. Save the world from a Digi-Disaster. The threat from the net meets the digital masters. It's just placing Digi in front of other words. That's the entire song. I kind of like the part in the first verse where they substitute the word Digi for Did You. That was clever. Look, I can make fun of this song as much as I want, but I was eating this crap up as a kid. What really sells this opening for me is the Digimon PNGs just floating around randomly. After that bit of greatness, we're dropped into what's essentially movie 1. The original OVA it's based on is simply titled Digimon Adventure and served as the prologue of the similarly named first season of Digimon, releasing on the same day of its premiere. Now, while one of the main complaints about Digimon the movie is how its decision to paste 3 different movies together makes for a completely incoherent film, I honestly think that it makes sense for Digimon Adventure and the second OVA, Digimon Our War Games, to be a part of the same package. Prior to Digimon the movie, we never got the Digimon Adventure short film in the US, and considering that Digimon Our War Games was essentially the grand finale of Digimon Adventure, it's kind of poetic that right before that, we get to see how it all began for the first time. It's just a nice treat for fans of the show. I'd even argue that it serves a purpose by sort of explaining what Digimon are to those unfamiliar with the show. It won't be until we get to the third OVA that we really start to see issues with this movie's structure, but we'll get there when we get there. Anyway, the plots of both versions of the Digimon Adventure OVA are pretty straightforward. One day, a young Tai and Kari, yes, I'm using the English names, I'm sorry if this bothers anyone, but I grew up with the dub, so just bear with me, stumble upon a Digi-Egg that was transported through their computer. It hatches and they bond with it, till it Digi-evolves into Agumon, who's way bigger than the Agumon in the anime. Like, holy crap, what was in that cat food they were feeding him? And he starts destroying things. Then another Digimon, Parrotmon, shows up and the two duke it out in a beautiful intense fight sequence. That culminates in Greymon taking out both himself and Parrotmon with one last attack. And for some reason, not a single adult noticed any of this. I enjoy both the sub and dub. They're both really charming, simple stories with their own strengths and weaknesses. The immediate advantage that the sub has over the dub is that it doesn't have Kari's incessant narration. For some reason, Fox thought it necessary to add narration courtesy of Kari, and it's honestly kind of annoying. The narration is only really useful in setting up the premise of the film and introducing the second generation of Digidestined. Beyond that though, the narration is mainly just Kari stating the obvious.
Tai's bond with War Greymon was so strong, Tai himself became digital.
You don't say! My dumb child brain could never put that together when watching Tai get closer to the screen, disappearing, then suddenly appearing in the digital world. Great job, Kari! It's also kind of weird that Kari's even the narrator to begin with, since she really doesn't get much to do beyond the first act. Personally, I think it would have made more sense for the narrator to be... Willis. Will be important later on in the movie. The sub version has a much more atmospheric feel to it that I really like. The soundtrack and calm atmosphere does a good job of selling you on the wonder that these two children are experiencing when encountering this strange creature from another world. The dub, on the other hand, is way more high energy. While it's still charming in a cheesy way, I kind of like the more chill approach the original has. For example, at one point, Koromon uses his entire body to hug Tai and Kari's faces. In the original, it's a really sweet, wholesome moment. While in Digimon the movie, it's played much more for comedy.
Thanks for saving me from that scratching furball.
But that's nothing compared to when Koromon's chased by the pet cat, which has to be the single most evil being in all of Digimon. How could you hurt this little guy, you monster? Just let him have some of your food! In the original, the scene's kind of comedic, but it's still a pretty low-key sequence. In Digimon the movie, however, it's added into this far more chaotic sequence, and for some reason, it's set to the song The Rocket Power Stank by Fatboy Slim. A song that feels just a bit too intense for a scene where a cat is chasing this fleshy blob thing. Damn it. Yeah, for some reason Fox decided to put in a bunch of licensed songs in Digimon the movie. It's probably one of the most infamous things about the movie, and I'm not going to lie, I unironically love this soundtrack. It's so painfully late 90s and early 2000s in all of the right ways. And while this first song isn't used in the best of places, fortunately the rest of the licensed songs in this movie are used more appropriately. Anyway, I prefer the more chill, atmospheric approach that the original short film was going for, at least up until Koromon digivolves into Agumon. While things play out almost exactly the same in both versions, it's the score that really makes a difference for me. The OVA score sounds nice and all, but I personally think that the one in the dub does more to enhance the action. The dub's grander orchestral score does a better job of portraying how potentially dangerous Agumon XL is, and makes the Greymon vs. Paramon fight feel more exciting. This is especially apparent in the fight's finale. In the dub, during the moment when it seems like Greymon's down for the count, Tai blows Kari's whistle to the top of his lungs and the orchestral rendition of the Digimon theme song triumphantly plays. When Greymon's eyes snap open, we get this killer rock song playing as he uses the last of his strength to take Paramon out. I just find it to be a much more fitting end to what's already a really cool fight. As a whole, while the atmospheric feel of the sub works better for the scenes of Tai and Kari bonding with Koromon, the more energetic, cheesy tone of the dub was much more fitting for the big fight at the end. Either way, the Digimon Adventure pilot film was charming, and the first part of Digimon the movie is overall solid, both in spite of and because of the corniness of the dub. Side note, for whatever reason, across all three of the original OVAs, there's only a single instance of a Digimon calling out its attack. I have no idea why they did this, but it just feels wrong. Like there's something missing. Anyway, on to Act 2/Movie 2, which is based off the OVA Our War game. Speaking of which, I have a bit of a confession to make. When I said that I loved Digimon the movie as a kid, I was more so referring to the Our War game segment. Don't get me wrong, there was enjoyment to be had in the first and third parts of the film, but they weren't nearly as fun or memorable as the Our War game adaptation. While I consider the entirety of Digimon the movie to be something of a guilty pleasure, I genuinely think that the Our War game segment is pretty good in its own right. There's a reason why when people talk about Digimon the movie, it's almost always in regards to the Our War game part. Even the marketing team knew that the Our War game segment was the main event, and had most of the advertisements focused squarely on it. And after having watched the original Japanese version of Our War game for this video, I have to say, the dub is way better. I don't know, maybe I'm a bit biased, but I kind of found OGR War Game to be kind of boring in comparison. I mean, it's not bad. It's just that the dub gives the story a level of energy and intensity that just isn't there in the original. While the additional jokes and licensed music weren't always used appropriately in the dub of the Digimon Adventure pilot, those additions fit the tone of the Our War Game dub much better, and makes the film more entertaining overall. The dub just makes this story feel way more like the original Digidestin's Last Hurrah. Like with the first OVA, the plots of the sub and dub are near identical and pretty straightforward. A rogue Digimon causes global chaos as it devours the world's data, and the Digidestined have to put a stop to him. That said, the dub actually adds a bit more depth to the story in some ways, particularly how it handles the main villain, Diaboromon. While Digimon Adventure has had plenty of great villains, Myotismon, Piedmon, that one Elvis Monkey Man, Diaboromon has to be my personal favorite. Everything about his presentation is so good. All of Diaboromon's Digivolutions have this really creepy, otherworldly look to them that you don't typically see in the anime. His pre-Digivolution forms also have these fittingly unnerving voices, while Diaboromon has this menacing, deep, gravelly voice that's just so memorable. And while he doesn't have a ton of dialogue, I like how whenever he does speak, it's solely to troll the Digidestined. Speaking of Diaboromon's voice, I just want to mention that when looking up the trailer for Digimon the movie, I found out that for some reason, they dubbed in this super generic bad guy voice for Diaboromon that sounds nothing like him.
You'll never stop me!
So that's neat, I guess. The story behind him is also interesting and surprisingly sad. So this kid named Willis, who we saw earlier in the film's opening narration, made Diaboromon so he could have another Digimon to play with, because I guess 2 Digimon just wasn't enough for that selfish tool. Unfortunately, Diaboromon was infected with a virus that caused him to constantly crave data, with the constant hunger causing him to lose his mind and resent Willis for creating him. Now Diaboromon is out to find his creator by any means necessary and straight up kill him. And how does he go about doing this? Well, by simply hacking into the Pentagon and launching nukes at his and the Digidestined's hometowns. You see what you've done, Willis? This is what happens when you try and play God. Like, Diaboromon is just so freaking ruthless. He's not out to take over or even destroy the real or digital world. No, he's just out for blood. I don't know, the danger he poses just feels so much more real than the other villains. The Mad Light even breaks the golden rule of anime and attacks the heroes mid-transformation. This legitimately blew my mind as a kid. Like, he can't do that, and yet he just did. That's how you know this dude doesn't f*** around. If you couldn't tell already, I really like Diaboromon. Great villain, easily my favorite thing about the movie. So imagine my surprise when I found out that in the original Owl War game, Diaboromon is just kind of there. He doesn't have a concrete origin story or any real motive like in the dub. He's just this rando Digimon who showed up one day and decided that he wanted to devour the world's data just cuz. Diaboromon also has little to no dialogue here, and the 1 or 2 times he does speak, it's in this weird high-pitched voice that just doesn't really fit. Outside of his cool designs, the original Diaboromon is a nothing villain who doesn't have the screen presence and memorability of his Western counterpart. So props to Digimon the movie's localization team for taking this really forgettable villain and making him into one of the franchise's best. Another thing I've noticed that when revisiting this movie, I ended up making a surprising discovery. Digimon the movie, specifically the Our War Game segment, is actually really funny. Like, holy crap, I do not remember the humor being so good in this film. While the OG Our War Game had humor in it too, I personally found the timing and delivery in the dub version to be significantly better. Seriously, I was not expecting this movie to have this many quality jokes and line reads. Joshua Seth as Tai has especially stellar comedic timing, and provides quite a few great deliveries. Although the MVP of this film has to be Tai's mom, who has this really good running gag about how she's an awful cook and makes these really bizarre foods. It's her voice actress Dorothy Ali's response delivery that really sells the joke for me.
So do I have enough of this stuff? Beats me, it's the first time I've used flour to bake a cake.
The biggest laugh the movie got out of me was this one bit where this guy gets ridiculously overcharged for groceries. If only for the dude's reaction, which is just perfect.
Really good chocolate. Paper or plastic?
In supermarkets all over the city, computer systems are failing, causing congestion.
I got you. Genuine laughter. I don't know who was behind that voice, but he deserves a frigging medal. You can really tell that the localization team and voice actors were having a blast with this script. So yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by the quality of Digimon the movie's humor. The action in this segment is also great, with the fight scenes being well animated and fast paced. I especially love how the fights are more brutal than the ones you typically see in the anime. With every impact that each attack makes, you can just feel that these Digimon are desperately fighting for their lives, and that Diaboromon is not not someone who screws around. And it all culminates in an absolutely glorious climax. Wargreymon and Metal are completely broken and beaten, surrounded by countless duplicates of Diaboromon as a nuke is minutes away from impacting Japan. Just when all hope seems lost, through the power of Tai and Matt's love for their Digimon, and the support of the children around the world, Wargreymon and Metal are able to combine and transform into the mighty Omnimon. Yes, it's really cheesy, but my god do I love this transformation sequence. What follows is Omnimon just mowing down thousands upon thousands of Diaboromon clones like it's nothing. And while the angelic choir that plays as Omnimon cleans house in the original OVA does a good job in capturing just how awe-inspiring and powerful he is, it's just not as hype as having a killer rock song like Let's Kick It Off playing. That music choice just makes the scene feel so much more triumphant. Damn it! The entire sequence is just so cool. I've seen it dozens of times now, and it still feels like an absolute spectacle. Unfortunately, despite my undying love for this part of the movie, it does have problems that are also present in the original Japanese version. There's this really pointless kind of romance subplot where Sora spends the entire act mad at Tai for giving her a hair clip, which she apparently takes as an insult to her hair and refuses to talk to him. Which is weird because I really do not remember Sora being this petty in the show. Anyway, Tai sent Sora an apology via email, but uh-oh, Tai accidentally signed it with love instead of from. How awkward! The email gets through to Sora after Omnimon puts a stop to Diabolomon's shenanigans, and she forgives Tai. That's it. Sure glad that we spent time on these prone for Tai Sora shippers. What makes this subplot even more egregious is that despite how both versions of the film blatantly ship tease Tai and Sora, come Digimon Adventure 2, Sora infamously ends up dating Matt, not Tai, which was apparently always series director Hiroyuki Kakuto's plan. So why was this subplot even here? This could be explained by Kakuto's lack of involvement in our war game, with the OVA instead being directed by Mamoru Hosoda, who I assume either shipped the hell out of Tai and Sora, or genuinely thought that the show was setting those two up, just like the rest of us. Seriously, if you thought that the backlash towards a couple like Ichigo and Orihime was intense, it was nothing compared to how fans reacted to Sora and Matt becoming official. I was only a mere boy when it all went down, but I've heard tales of the ship wars. Oh god, the ship wars were a bloodbath. That said, even if Tai and Sora became official down the line, that wouldn't make the whole subplot any less of an unnecessary, kind of obnoxious distraction from the main story. Although I will say that the original Japanese version does handle this subplot better. The original OVA actually contains a scene where Sora also apologizes to Tai, and in the film's end credits, Sora's shown wearing the hair clip he gave her. It's a cute moment that offers more closure to the romance subplot that isn't there in the dub. Still doesn't make the subplot necessary in any way, but it's something. My other issue with this segment is that, despite this essentially being the grand finale to Digimon Adventures, half of the Digidestined don't contribute in any way. While Sora just kind of spends the film moping around, the excuse we're given for Joe, Mimi, and Kari's lack of involvement is that they're just preoccupied with other things. What really bothers me about this is that Tai does contact them, but for some reason doesn't tell them that the fate of the world is literally at stake. And while you could excuse Joe and Mimi for not getting involved right away, since Joe was taking a summer exam, Mimi was out of the country, and neither of them had cell phones. Remember, this was the year 2000. But there's absolutely no excuse for Kari to not immediately help fight Diaboromon. Not only does she actually have a cell phone, not only is she not that far away at all, but the thing that's keeping her busy is a friend's birthday party. That's it. Like, Tai, tell your sister to forget about birthday cake and to get her butt home. Literal lives are at stake here. Personally, I would have had the others pull through just as Wargreymon and Metal were getting utterly demolished, and have their Digimon try and help fight the Diaboromon clones. Those issues aside, I really do love the Our War Game segment of the movie. The fights are well animated, the dialogue's funny, the villain's great, and the entire thing is just goofy fun. Which leads us to Act 3/Movie 3, which in its original release was a two-part OVA. The first part titled Hurricane Touchdown, and the second titled Transcendent Evolution: The Golden Digimedals, which is a mouthful, so I'll be referring to it as Hurricane Touchdown for the sake of convenience. In comparison to the dubs of the Adventure Pilot and our war game, Hurricane Touchdown has a lot more going on both in terms of its plot and the way it was incorporated into Digimon the movie. So in case you're wondering why this segment of the video is so much longer than the others, well, here you go. I'll be honest, the third act is the point where the film kind of falls apart, and shows why combining three completely unrelated movies into one is not a very good idea. Like I said earlier, combining the Digimon Adventure Pilot movie and our war game makes sense, given that they act as the prologue and an epilogue of Digimon Adventure. What makes less sense is having your movie's third act be based on an OVA with an entirely different cast of characters that weren't relevant up until this point, save for Willis. Even then, despite the dub's best attempts to have Willis act as the narrative throughline that connects the Our War Game and Hurricane Touchdown segments, that doesn't prevent the final act from feeling completely disconnected from the rest of the film. What makes matters worse is that Hurricane Touchdown's tone does not lend itself well to being made into the final act of a movie at all. Now typically in a movie, the third act is where the stakes are at their highest, and where the most excitement happens. So how do you think Digimon the movie raises the stakes when the second act involves the villain attempting to nuke Japan? Short answer is, they don't. Hurricane Touchdown is a significantly lower stakes, slower paced, more personal film that's nowhere near as exciting or as entertaining as the dub of our war game. This wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing if it weren't for the fact that these OVAs are a part of a single movie in the US, and leaves the third act of Digimon the movie feeling at odds with the rest of the film. Even one of the film's directors, Jeff Nimoy, knew that making Hurricane Touchdown part of Digimon the movie was a bad idea, and wanted the dub for that to be an entirely separate straight-to-television film. But Fox wanted a feature-length Digimon film, and they were going to get it, no matter how little sense it made to the film's plot. The really funny thing about all of this is that in early 2001, another Digimon OVA was released titled Diaboromon Strikes Back, in which the titular villain of our war game returns to exact his revenge on the Digidestined. Having this OVA be the third act of Digimon the movie would have made so much more sense. Unlike Hurricane Touchdown, the tone of Diaboromon Strikes Back is way more in line with our war game, being a simple yet exciting story about the Digidestined fighting an evil Digimon. As opposed to having the third act shift to an entirely different narrative that barely has anything to do with the previous act, we would have had the villain fought in the second act come back in the third act bigger and badder than ever, making the film as a whole more narratively coherent, as it cements Diaboromon as the main antagonist of the entirety of Digimon the movie. Not only that, but Diaboromon Strikes Back escalates from our war game in the way that would work as the movie's final act, with Diaboromon entering the real world in a giant, more powerful form, making for an appropriately exciting climactic finale to the film. Well, that would mean that Diaboromon would no longer have his cool backstory due to Willis no longer needing to be inserted into the Our War Game segment. I think that having the film end on the Diaboromon Strikes Back OVA would have overall improved Digimon the movie. And all of this could have been done if Fox decided to make Digimon the movie just 1 year later. Now, disregarding its place in Digimon the movie, both the sub and dub of Hurricane Touchdown are interesting to me for entirely different reasons. Unlike the prior OVA adaptations, where the general plot was roughly the same with some alterations here and there, the Hurricane Touchdown segment has a ton of content that got cut and changed for Digimon the movie, to the point where the two versions barely resemble each other. And let me tell ya, watching both versions of this story was nothing shy of a journey. The plot of the dub revolves around the man, the myth, the legend himself, Willis. An American kid who, alongside his partner Terriermon, because of course Willis gets to have the objectively best Digimon, is on the run from Cocomon. Cocomon is, or was, also Willis's Digimon partner, until he was corrupted by the same virus that infected Diaboromon, transforming him into a hulking monster who can only spell "go back" and "destroy," as he causes destruction around him. Unsure as to what Cocomon wants, Willis journeys to his old hometown, believing that doing so would somehow appease him. Conveniently, Kari and TK happen to have taken a trip to the US, and encounter Willis as he and Terriermon fight Cocomon. Being the Digidestined and all, they asked Davis and the other two whose names escape me. I'm sorry I didn't watch Digimon Adventure 2 nearly as much as Adventure, but they don't really do anything in this movie, so who cares? To handle things. Let's just get this out of the way. Dub Hurricane Touchdown is nowhere near as good as Dub Our War Game. While the animation is still great, the fight scenes are nowhere near as intense or memorable. I did like the opening fight between Kokomon and Terriermon though. They do a good job of giving Kokomon's movement weight, and making him feel like this clumsy, lumbering mass, which neatly contrasts the more agile, nimble movements of the far smaller Terriermon. Unfortunately, all of the other fights are just kind of dull and lacking in energy. Weirdly enough, while editing, I found out that for whatever reason, most of the fights in the original Hurricane Touchdown have these really weird cuts and edits made to them that end up making the already meh action so much worse. For example, take this bit in the original where Kokomon is fighting Flamedramon. Flamedраmon's about to attack. Kokomon teleports in front of him. We see a close-up of a pissed-off Kokomon. Kokomon swings his arms. Flamedramon is invisible, and there's an emerging dust cloud at the side of a nearby hill. Davis reacts negatively to Flamedramon being attacked, and we see a closer look of Flamedramon impacting the hillside. It's really lame that we don't see Kokomon's attack actually contacting Flamedramon, but it's still communicated well enough as to what's happening during this exchange. Now here's the dub version of this sequence. Flamedramon's about to attack. Kokomon teleports in front of him. We cut to Davis shouting encouragement to Flamedramon. We see Flamedramon impacting a hillside. I'm sorry, but what? It may only be a couple of seconds, but the dub cuts out crucial information from that exchange that makes this sequence look so much worse. There are multiple exchanges in this segment that get cuts and edits like these, that cause the action sequences to feel awkward and hard to follow. The dialogue is also forgettable. While the Our War Game dub ranged from being endearingly corny to sincerely funny, the Hurricane Touchdown dub is pretty bland. It severely lacks the fun and humor that was in the Our War Game dub. The only joke that actually landed was this notorious exchange between Willis and Davis, just because of the hilarious tonal whiplash.
I'm the one with the problem, not you. Get over it.
Okay.
God bless this stupid movie. While there is more going on with the plot than in the previous segments, and the core conflict is conceptually interesting, in execution the story is pretty boring. The Hurricane Touchdown dub is an overall mediocre, forgettable end to Digimon the movie. Is what I thought at first, but then I watched the original version of the OVA and my god, did it completely change my perspective. As I watched through the original Hurricane Touchdown, I came across so many scenes I recognized from the dub as jokes, only here they were actually dramatic moments. Do you remember that legendary bit where Davis cries about Willis's backstory, then immediately gets over it? Well, as it turns out, it was originally a serious scene where he was distraught at the tragedy of Willis needing to put down one of his own Digimon. And knowing that this sincere, tearjerker moment was turned into a dumb joke makes this scene so much funnier. I'm sorry, but I can't help but genuinely admire the sheer audacity of the localization team for turning this attempt at a serious story into a complete farce. Again, the directors didn't want Hurricane Touchdown to be a part of the movie, and considering how much of a clusterfuck the original Japanese version is, I can only imagine at some point someone in the writer's room just went, "Screw it, none of this makes sense, let's just do whatever. Oh, Willis is calling his mom in this scene? Let's change it into him ordering a pizza. Why not? Who cares?" I know this sounds weird, but now that I know how much the dub version cheapens OG Hurricane Touchdown, it kind of elevates the third act of Digimon the movie from being lackluster and underwhelming to being the greatest post ever made. As for the original Hurricane Touchdown, I'm more mixed on it than anything. Again, the concept of a Digimon tamer having to put down their own Digimon is really interesting, and there are even some good emotional beats here and there, but the OVA is held back by some really bizarre, nonsensical decisions in its narrative and presentation. As we'll discuss throughout, the original OVA is really freaking weird. But before we get into the absurdity that is Hurricane Touchdown's plot, I'd like to go over the main characters, since again, they have way more going on here than in the previous OVAs, starting with none other than Willis. Let me tell you about freaking Willis. I absolutely do not have strong feelings towards him whatsoever. Surprise! My undying hatred for Willis was all just a bit. Really, it's less that I hate Willis, and more that I just don't find him that interesting. I just think it's funny how Willis is the most important character in Digimon the movie, and is built up throughout the first and second acts, only for him to be this forgettable white boy who's never mentioned in any piece of Digimon media again. I don't know, he's just one of those characters who's fun to bully. Anyway, while his relationship with Kokomon is kind of interesting, particularly in the Japanese version, where there's greater emphasis on him dealing with having to put down Kokomon, Willis himself just isn't that captivating of a character. I honestly couldn't tell you much about him, beyond that he's reluctant to get close to others, out of fear that Kokomon will end up hurting them. Although the sub also portrays him as a massive flirt who immediately hits on Glasses Girl during their one interaction, and in both versions kisses her and Kari at the end of the movie, even though I don't think he even interacted with the latter at all. Because of course Willis is that guy. I honestly find it funny that Hurricane Touchdown tries to portray this unremarkable 12-year-old boy as a ladies' man. Like, come on Digimon, this is Willis we're talking about. There was serious potential with Willis, but overall I'd say he's a pretty lead character. Kokomon, while being nowhere near as memorable or threatening as Diaboromon, on his own I'd say he's a pretty decent villain with some really cool designs and a super tragic story. Like I said earlier, Kokomon became this rampaging monster as a result of being infected by the same virus that Diaboromon had. Only unlike Diaboromon, who's hell-bent on killing his creator and annihilating anyone that stands in his way, by the end of the movie, we learned that all Kokomon really wanted was for Willis to kill him and put an end to his suffering. Which, holy crap, that's dark. As for his original counterpart, I find this version of Kokomon to be more interesting. Here, Kokomon is basically this big destructive kid who wants to go back to the way things were before his transformation, which makes the part where he de-ages the Digidestined make way more sense thematically. Where in the dub, it's just kind of a thing that happens for no real reason. This characterization for Kokomon gives the story a layer of tragedy that's absent from the dub, given that the heroes are forced to kill this childlike beast who's essentially throwing a fit. The scene where Willis confronts Kokomon in the flower fields they used to play in perfectly encapsulates the tragedy behind this character. It's a haunting, somber moment where Kokomon believes that Willis can somehow make things go back to the way they were, back before his transformation, only for that joy to turn into despair, as Willis confronts him with the sad reality of the situation. He's changed. There's something wrong with him, and living in the past isn't going to fix things, which leads him to break down and wail about how much he wants to go back. It's a tearjerker of a moment that just makes you feel for this poor creature, and is easily the high point of the OVA. While he's now among the franchise's best villains, and Digimon the movie definitely gave him a raw deal by forcing him to compete with Diaboromon, Kokomon's still a pretty solid villain. As for the rest of the cast, there honestly isn't a whole lot to say. Terriermon is a good boy and I love him and I want to buy all of his marketable plushies. Davis said his relationship with Willis isn't very interesting, beyond the sub-exclusive bit where he's torn up over the tragedy of the situation. It's also really obnoxious how much he simps over Kari. Like, dude, she doesn't want you. Let it go. Despite being prominent early on, Kari and TK kind of disappear from the plot up until the big climax. They only really exist to move the plot along by telling the Digidestined about Willis, and to give them a random-ass power-up in the climax. And Davis's two friends are also there. Now let's get to how Hurricane Touchdown makes zero sense. For starters, unlike in Digimon the movie, for some reason the original OVA never really gives an explanation as to what happened to Kokomon, or how he became this monster. He just disappeared one day and then came back as a monster for some reason. I mean, it's not that big of a deal, since at the end of the day, the how or why behind this transformation isn't super important to the OVA's narrative. I just think that choosing not to explain it is a weird creative decision as all. What I take more issue with is the subplot where Kokomon kidnaps the Digidestined. So in the sub, Kokomon has the ability to take other people into this distorted dimension, where he tries to pretend that things are exactly like they were before his transformation. And for some reason he decides to kidnap the OG Digidestined and trap them in this dimension to act as replacements for Willis. I understand why Kokomon wants to replace Willis, given that he's unwilling to play into his fantasies. And it makes sense that he wants the replacement to be another Digimon tamer, but why choose the original Digidestined specifically and not include the new ones? This is even funnier since Digimon Adventure 2 would later reveal that there are Digidestined all around the world, meaning that Kokomon had tons of options for a Willis replacement that he just ignored. I guess he only cared about the original Digidestined, just like the rest of the internet. Wait, that joke doesn't work because Digimon Tamers exists. And also because he skipped over TK and Kari for some reason. There is one scene where the two are on a train, and it looks like Kokomon's about to take them, but then their Digivices glow, meaning he can't. For some reason, I think Kokomon also takes all of the other people on the train, as well as the people in the city block he was fighting Terriermon in. Why did he do this when he was seemingly after Digidestined specifically to take Willis's place? Did he actually not care whether or not Willis's replacement was a Digidestined? Then why target the Digidestined to begin with? And why don't we ever see the other people he kidnapped in his dimension?
It just raises too many questions.
I'm pretty sure this was just a convenient way to keep Digimon a secret from the rest of the world. It just wasn't thought out very well. Although I guess it's better than how the dub handled it, where Kokomon isn't taking people, so it's never explained why the city and train are just eerily empty. The thing that really gets me about the whole kidnapping subplot is that it's ultimately kind of pointless. The inclusion of the OG Digidestined doesn't amount to much beyond a couple of short scenes of them being confused and scared. They don't serve any purpose here beyond giving the Adventure 2 Digidestined more of a motivator to get involved in the plot. And for whatever reason, we don't see them get rescued. I mean, we're told they're okay, but why would you choose not to show the resolution to this subplot? It's just so bizarre. Seriously, you could remove the entirety of that subplot from the movie and hardly anything would change. Which is exactly what Digimon the movie did, and nothing of value was lost. And then we have the climax, where Angemon and Angewomon digivolve into their mega forms and produce golden Digi-Eggs to power up Vmon and Terriermon. Something the show never established they were capable of doing, and isn't given any foreshadowing or build-up in the movie whatsoever. It's just kind of a thing that happens. The sub at least tries to handwave it by having the Digimon tell TK and Kari to combine Light and Hope in order to get them to reach these forms, whatever that's supposed to mean. And while I know it's a filler movie and that we're not supposed to think about how it would affect canon, I just find it really funny that they never think to use these forms after all of this. Except they do when Digimon try, because I don't know. All that said, I can't complain too much, since the transformation sequences and designs for both pairs are really sick. One last thing I have to say about Hurricane Touchdown is that I really don't understand the choice in soundtrack. Say what you will about the dub's constant use of 90s rock, but at least it tried to set an appropriately exciting mood for its fight scenes. Meanwhile, Hurricane Touchdown's soundtrack has this weirdly laid-back, chill vibe to it that often undersells the action happening on screen. All I'm saying is that the right soundtrack can do wonders in enhancing the mood of a scene, and this one actively kills any and all attempts the OVA makes to be exciting. All in all, I think the sub version of Hurricane Touchdown is technically better. It has a much more captivating plot, some solid dramatic moments, and is nowhere near the disjointed, poorly paced train wreck that the dub is. However, I got more entertainment out of the dub. It's just such a hot mess that I can't help but enjoy it. Now, before we finally wrap things up, I want to talk about how both Hurricane Touchdown and Digimon the movie end. Hurricane Touchdown ends on a pretty heartwarming note, with Willis and Terriermon fighting Kokomon's Digi-Egg and running after it, closing on an image of Willis and his two Digimon happy to be reunited. Well, at least his Digimon are happy. Willis doesn't seem to feel strongly either way, because nothing's ever good enough for good old Willis. However, Digimon the movie, for whatever reason, decides to take bits of a scene where Willis confronts Kokomon in the flower field that were cut from the movie, edited and recontextualized it into a reborn Kokomon happily singing and dancing, even though that's supposed to be his evil form, and slapped it at the end of the movie. Okay, but why add this when you already had a perfectly good ending? However, Digimon the movie makes up for this less effective ending by closing out on the only licensed song that could possibly encapsulate how utterly buck wild this entire movie is. All Star by Smash Mouth. I am not joking, this is actually what they went with. They took the most emotional, powerful moment in the OVA and played the funny meme song over it, and pre-Shrek no less. Just... this movie, man. Oh, come on! And that was Digimon the movie. Did I like it? Hell yes. Is it good? The answer is complicated. The adventure pilot segment is charming, and I do genuinely love the Our War Game segment. The Hurricane Touchdown segment, despite having something of a so bad it's good charm to it, is nowhere near as good as the rest of the movie. And as a whole, despite its best attempts, Digimon the movie just isn't a very coherent film, with the overarching story being something of a disjointed, wonky mess. That said, even if you're not familiar with Digimon, I still strongly recommend watching Digimon the movie at least once. Not only is it a fun watch in spite of its flaws, Digimon the movie is such a fascinating, strange product of its time that it really does need to be seen to be believed. I also think that the original OVAs are worth checking out. While they're also far from perfect, I think they at least make for interesting watches. Except for OG Our War Game. The dub literally does everything the original version does, only better in every way. You really won't be missing anything by skipping that one. Regardless, I absolutely love the mess that is Digimon the movie. It's a really fun, enjoyably dumb film that I will never get tired of, and I'm happy that I got to take this lengthy trip down memory lane with you guys. And now if you'll excuse me, I'll be over in the corner wondering where it all went wrong, and lamenting that I can never return to the simpler times of my youth. I am a very sad person.
Hey, what's up? It's me. Stop!